I love getting drunk and I love getting high. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Grew up in an alcoholic family. My dad drank a lot, and my parents ended up getting divorced when I was 5 years old. I wasn't in touch with any of my feelings. I didn't understand any of that stuff back then. I was just really angry. So I blamed my mom for the divorce, and I essentially blamed her for ruining my life. And so I end up living with my dad, and about that time, my dad became a born-again Christian, decided that he was going to quit drinking, quit doing drugs, quit cussing, quit listening to rock and roll music, quit watching TV. I mean, anything of the secular nature, we got rid of. And I was very confused in that. First, my dad was drinking and partying and listening to loud rock and roll, and now we're going to church every Sunday, and it was such an extreme change, and I didn't quite know how to adjust to that. But I ended up going to a Christian school as a result of my dad's becoming a born-again Christian from 3rd to 8th grade. Already being angry at my mom ruining my life and already being angry at the changes that were going on and, just being a generally angry kid, I ended up getting in a lot of trouble in school. Anyway, I started drinking when I was 12 years old, and when I say started drinking, I don't necessarily mean drinking every day. I mean, that was the first time that I got drunk, was when I was 12. I remember sitting at the bus stop and watching all the public school kids, and they would wear leather jackets and Metallica shirts and have green and purple hair and mohawks and shaved heads and long hair and earrings, and they cussed and they smoked and they talked about going to parties, and I would look at these guys and think, man, they are cool. Like, these are the cool people. Those are the people that I want to become. And they're not going to let me do that in this Christian school I'm going to. It's hard enough to not have to wear a tie on Fridays. So I've already got this twisted perception of what fun is. For whatever reasons, when I was a kid, my thought of fun was going to the bar and getting drunk and breaking rules and breaking laws and being deviant, like all these guys, and, just more or less screwing up. That was what was fun. And I always felt really different. That was the other thing about my childhood and going to this Christian school and even sitting at the bus stop, is I always felt really different. I remember sitting at the bus stop watching these guys in admiration, but thinking, gosh, I'm a geek. I'm such a loser, and don't talk to me, don't talk to them, don't look at me. I'm short, I'm fat, I got curly hair, I'm miserable, I hate everybody around me, I hate my parents, and I just felt really, really different and really alone. I just wanted to feel a part of. I didn't care of what. I just wanted to feel a part of something. And I felt isolated, and I felt apart from as opposed to a part of. I decided that I wanted to drink, and I wanted to get high. And I knew that I would be able to do that if I went to live with my mom. I could go to a public school, and I kind of threw the whole family for a loop. But I ended up moving out to live with my mom, and as predicted, we didn't get along. She was miserable, I was miserable. Nonetheless, I did succeed in what I had set out to accomplish, and I immediately hooked up with people who got drunk, and that's really where my alcoholism and drug addiction started to skyrocket. Suddenly I had access to everything that I needed. Suddenly I had all these people who didn't really care about who I was or where I came from or what I was about. As long as I got high with them, as long as I drank with them periodically, they didn't really care. So I did that, and I started hooking up with the kids who got in trouble all the time, and eventually I started using on a day-to-day basis. Once I discovered the alcohol, I fell in love. I had finally found something that took away all the anger and took away all the aggression and took away all the loneliness. The more I got high and the more I drank, the less important it became for me to go to school. The less important it became for me to make some attempt to have a relationship with my mom. And all those things started to fall by the wayside. I became more and more focused on the friends and on getting in trouble. And I didn't set out to get in trouble. It just so happened that the things I like to do resulted in me getting in trouble. My grades were getting worse, and my parents would start yelling at me about my grades. And I would feel a lot of shame and guilt, and I would feel frustrated. And that was a direct result of my getting high and getting drunk, but since I was feeling like a loser and feeling like I wasn't smart enough or capable of doing this stuff, I would continue to use. The more I used, the more I got in trouble for it, and the more the things would happen. And the more the things happened, the worse I felt, and the worse I felt, the more I wanted to use. And it became this vicious cycle. I didn't have to use for 20 years for me to get to a point where I felt that I was completely out of control. It took me a short 5 years, and by the end of 11th grade, or near the end of 11th grade anyway, my use of drugs, my drinking had led me to dealing acid. Eventually, a girl overdosed. Her heart stopped. She was officially dead for 2 minutes, and she ended up going to the hospital. And there was a police investigation done, and she told the cops that I dealt her the acid. And so, the next day, the cops came to the school and arrested me, just like that, just within a flash. I'm in a jail cell. Being in high school, being in 11th grade, thinking that everything was totally cool, and I've got some acid on me, and I'm gonna make some sales tonight, and things are, I was just doing my deal, and people knew me as the acid dealer, and I had the whole school, knowing who I was, just wanting once again to fit in, and I would do everything in my power to fit in, and I didn't want to feel my feelings. The more I used drugs, the farther away I got from my feelings, but the more I used drugs, the more it created the problems and caused the feelings to continue happening. I remember my turning point in terms of when I got sober. I was laying in the jail cell staring up at the ceiling, and at that point in time, I was 17 years old. They were going to hold me until I was 18 and try me as an adult. If I was convicted for everything, I was going to be going away for a long time. And I remember laying in the jail cell, consciously thinking about everything that had happened. Consciously thinking about the fact that I'm going to prison, that I'm almost 18, that I'm almost an adult, and this is where I'm at right now. And all of my dreams of finishing high school and graduating and going to college and having those 2.3 kids in the white picket fence and the car in the garage and the wife and the family and all that stuff they were gone. And I remember thinking, I should really be feeling something. I should be feeling anger at this girl who narked on me. I should be feeling remorse that somebody almost died. I should be feeling scared that I'm going to be going to prison for the rest of my life. I should be feeling something. And I felt nothing. I was completely numb. That was the whole idea behind using, was to get completely numb, was to not feel anything. And once I got to that point where I achieved that goal, it scared me. It scared me to death. I realized at that point in time that something different had to happen. It wasn't necessarily that I had to stop getting high or quit drinking, but something different had to happen. So I ended up going to a treatment center, and I was inpatient for 30 days and outpatient for 2 months after that point. Through the help of some of the counselors that were there who had just kept nitpicking away at me, you're a drug addict, you have a problem with alcohol, you have a problem with drugs, if you don't stop you're going to die, blah blah blah, just all this stuff. And the first 2 weeks that I was there I was really irritated because they're telling me all this stuff that I don't want to hear, I don't want to deal with. They think they know everything, they don't know who I am, they just need to leave me alone, they don't know what my problems are. I was just a pain in treatment the whole time. I had this moment of clarity halfway through treatment where I realized that if something different didn't happen, I was going to die. And what I realized also is that chances are it's the drugs and the alcohol that's going to take me down. I really probably need to stop getting high and getting drunk. It was a very surreal moment for me. I just felt totally separated from myself at that point in time. I remember curling up in a ball and just crying and having all these thoughts and all these feelings. And there's this counselor who came in and sat on the foot of my bed and proceeded to talk to me about powerlessness and told me about my life being unmanageable, and more or less pointed out the first step of the 12 steps to me and directly related it to me. And it clicked and it made sense, and it was just boom, I was there with it. The next 2 weeks that I was an inpatient, I shut up and I listened, and I quit fighting the staff, and I quit arguing with everything they had to say, and I quit trying to second guess their judgments and second guess their opinions, and realized that maybe they know something that I don't. They've been around this a lot longer, and chances are I'm not the first resistant drug addict to come through here, and I'm probably not going to be the last resistant drug addict, and maybe I should just shut up and listen for once. And that was one thing that I wasn't used to doing. The whole time that I used, the whole time that I've, as far as I can remember, as long as I've been alive, I didn't listen to anybody. I thought that I knew what was going on. My best thinking got me locked up in a treatment center. Got me locked up in jail, got me facing 35 years in prison, got me facing jail time for the majority of my life. That was where my best thinking got me. When I was discharged from treatment, I ended up following through with some young people's meetings. I remember being scared the first meeting that I went to. I remember there was a lot of people, a lot of kids there, kids being 16, 17, anywhere from 13 on up to 30. A lot of people there, and they were enthusiastic, and their eyes were bright, and their skin looked good, and their hair was combed, and some of them still had mohawks and long hair and whatnot, but they looked presentable, and they looked attractive, and they looked like they were happy. And I came up with 60 days sober, and I remember going to the meeting that night, and They went around the room and they asked if anybody had stayed sober for 30 days and 60 days and 90 days, and I stood up for 60 days. For the first time in my life, I felt a part of. And I remember looking around the room at everybody that was in there, and they were all clapping, and they were all sincerely happy. Like, they were all happy for me that I was able to make it 60 days without drinking. They were excited. There were people whistling and cheering, and they did that for everybody, too. It wasn't just me. Like, these guys were just happy when people stayed sober. And for the first time, and I don't know how long, I felt like I had done something right. And I felt connected, and I felt like I belonged there. And it was the first time that I had ever really had that feeling, and it was really overwhelming. But it was what I needed for me to continue going back to the meetings. I've been to a lot of meetings where there's people older than me, people older than 30 years old, and people with gray hair who have had bankruptcies and divorces and lost kids and families and cars, wrecked cars and DUIs and all this stuff, and drank for 20 or 30 years, and I've gone to meetings and I've been the only young person in the room. Going to a meeting where I'm listening to people talk about bankruptcy and divorce and DUIs and wrecked cars and lost families would make it very easy for me to say, well, I never did any of that stuff, so I must not have a problem. And what I've discovered in going to young people's meetings is that that's not the case. I don't have to do any of that stuff to realize that I have a problem. I can have the same feelings of loss and the same feelings of guilt and the same feelings of anger that these people have with relation to their experience, not having to do all that stuff. And getting kicked out of school would be equivalent to getting fired from a job. And getting kicked out of the house would be equivalent to getting a divorce. And fighting with mom and dad is the same thing as fighting with a wife or a husband, and so granted the situations are different, the feelings are the same. And on that level, I can relate with any alcoholic no matter what their age, and any drug addict no matter what their age, because we all go through the same stuff. When I deal with the reasons why I'm miserable and I change those things, then I don't feel miserable anymore. If I don't feel miserable, I don't find it necessary to alter the way that I feel. If I don't find it necessary to alter the way that I feel, I don't have to get high and I don't have to drink. And if I don't do those things, I don't experience consequences. It's kind of a chain reaction. As long as I'm taking care of myself, and as long as I'm working my program, then I'm able to deal with situations as they come. What I've discovered is that the alcohol and the drugs are not necessarily the problem so much as me being the problem. It wasn't the alcohol and the drugs that caused my life to become unmanageable so much as me choosing to do the drugs and the alcohol. If I continued to get high and continue to drink, inevitably I'm going to continue to get in trouble. It's just that simple. That's what I did. I went back to school and I graduated, and my GPA was a 1.3, but I graduated high school, and that was major. That was a major deal. And after high school, I ended up going to college, and I graduated college, and I've got a bachelor's degree today. I know in my gut that I never would have graduated high school, and I never would have been a college graduate had I not been sober, had I not been working the steps, had I not been doing what I need to do to work a program and maintain my sobriety. I have to put as much energy and as much focus and as much into my staying sober as I did into my getting loaded, or else I'm probably going to get loaded. And so that's what I do today. My life today is so much different than it used to be when I was getting loaded. If I wasn't happier today than I was back then, I wouldn't be here right now. It's just that simple.